Okay, welcome everyone to ARTIVISM, the Power of Art for Social Transformation. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel, ARTIVISM for Shared Humanity. So if you do not want your image to be recorded, you can turn off your cameras. Today we welcome Dave Gussak. Welcome, Dave. Thank you everyone also for joining us from all over. Dave Gussak, PhD, ATR, BCHLM, is professor for the Florida State University's Graduate Art Therapy Program and project coordinator for the Florida State University, Florida Department of Corrections Art Therapy and Prisons Program. He has presented and published extensively internationally and nationally on forensic art therapy and art therapy in forensic settings. These include, amongst others, Art on Trial, Art Therapy for Capital Murder Cases, 2013, Art and Art Therapy with the Imprisoned, Recreating Identity, 2019, and The Frenzied Dance of Art and Violence, which I love, by the way, because there's a lot of art history, 2022. In 2022, Dr. Gussak was granted the American Art Therapy Association's Honorary Lifetime Member Award, HLM. Thank you, Dave.
It is my pleasure. And I know that a couple of you are probably not muted, so if we can just do that, but there'll be plenty of time for us to have a conversation. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can see the presentation, so that there's some semblance of kind of understanding, hopefully, of what I'm trying to talk about here, which is very optimistic on my part. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so very much for having me here. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be part of the ARTIVISM cadre of presenters, the weekly lineups. I've gotten a chance to get to know Carolina and Argy fairly well over the past year, and I had a chance to meet them last year for the first time at a symposium presentation that we provided here last year. And despite that presentation, they still wanted to have me back to present. So I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much, Argy. And essentially, what I'm going to be doing is presenting various perspectives on art within correctional settings. To begin with, I'll provide a general overview of what social interactionism and labeling theory is, and particularly how it guides my work. As I've come to recognize over these many years, is that art can help those who have become marginalized by being reaccepted into a community, validated and valued by the very groups that have shunned them. So the lenses that I have chosen is that of social interaction and labeling theory have helped me clarify how art making can reverse alienation and create bridges within communities. So I intend to underscore through personal experiences, case illustrations, and research, and of course, stories, hopefully lots of stories, how art and art making was used to relabel the oppressed and recreate new identities and foster reemergence and reacceptance into society, in a sense, reversing the dehumanization that occurs for control. Many of you have heard this parts of this presentation before, but I hope that there's something in here that you'll be able to take away, something new with this work. I'll also provide examples of how the art promotes relabeling and can help rehumanize the dehumanized. I'll discuss strategies and methods of art making despite the limitations imposed inside. And these are the strategies and methods that have actually been conducted by those that are inside the prisons. I'll also introduce such valuable arts programming from around the world, and some of you may recognize your own work and your own names in these programs. I'll delineate the benefits of art therapy within the correctional milieu towards the end of the presentation. And sorry, my computer just told me that a program had closed on emergency. I wanted to make sure it wasn't this one. And eventually, what I intend to do is apologize profusely for going over time and offering to buy any and all of you drinks as recompense, except, of course, sorry. To begin with, social interactionism is a framework through which social reality is interpreted. Those who subscribe to interactionism contend that who we are and how we see ourselves is contingent upon whom and what we interact with. There exists interdependence between the social environment and individuals, and a person's self-identity emerges from society's interpersonal interactions and the perceptions of others. Now, interactions may not be just between people, but may also be between people and objects. Artifacts have meanings for people, meanings which Bloomer indicated is not intrinsic to the object, but arises from how the person is initially prepared to act toward it. So it's the sharing of such objects and the interpretation thereof, define and shape an interaction, a dynamic, thus helping create interrelationships and new meanings. Such objects, and this is the beautiful part of all this, such objects include art. If it didn't include art, I wouldn't be here. But simply put, meanings and interpretations are social products, and art can sometimes be the link or the glue that bring us together and make that happen. So within this theoretical perspective lies labeling theory. Labels are provided by those dominant within a society. Once a decision to label someone who has deviated from social norms is made, a new identity is created. The person thus labeled often come to accept this new identity or the identity that's forced upon them, and the real or perceived deviance is amplified. So it becomes a never-ending cycle. Thus, through oppressive label, identities can be stripped away, reinforcing a loss of self, deliberately disempowering and objectifying them. We see this time and time again, that oftentimes the majority defines the minority, and that isn't just about numbers. It's about who at that time has wrested power from the group. We recognize down in the 80s and 90s when apartheid ruled the roost in South Africa, the white people were greatly outnumbered by the Black population, and yet it was the white people that defined the deviant identity of the other culture. So its majority is taken away and defines the minority group. And for example, of course, I saw this constantly in the prisons where I worked. So once a prison inmate, always an inmate. And I would argue that the reason that recidivism is so high, the reason so many come back is because they are seen as, and more importantly, come to see themselves as prison inmate. How can anyone rise above such a self-label? They belong in prison and they're constantly reminded of this. Now, this piece you're going to become familiar with a little bit later, but identity for the inmate is stripped away and they are given a number and a uniform to reinforce their loss of self, disempowering and objectifying them, all in the name of safety and security. In order to maintain control, the system dehumanizes and objectifies these people. They give them numbers and the same uniforms. They strip them of that sense of self. Never mind that such acts further reinforce their separation from society, making it challenging to reintegrate once given the chance. They often struggle to knock off the label they have been given, making it difficult, at times impossible, to be reaccepted by society. They are known as convicts. This is especially arduous for those who are imprisoned with a mental illness. In attempts to reinforce an identity inside, some even engage in fairly dangerous and, dare I say it, nefarious acts to be seen as significant or powerful in a powerless environment. And I say that because I always wanted to use nefarious in a sentence. So I'm just putting that aside. Giving them a voice, a new label, a sense of self would help them to rise above the quagmire they have found themselves. But we have a secret weapon, and I know you know what this is. We have the art. And as I soon discovered, art and art making could help reverse this trend, providing an opportunity to relabel and recreate new identities, and in essence, strengthen one's new place in a community. The art that my colleague, Will Ersprung, termed insider art. Now, art brut, raw art, is commonly known as outsider art, which refers to work created by those in the margins and fringes of society outside the mainstream art world. Now, I have my own issue with the term outsider art because the very nature of that term continues to reinforce the marginalization of this group of artists and keeps them on the outside. So I do prefer the term art brut or raw art. However, Ersprung played around with this term and coined it to reflect similar art made inside. That term, I'm proud to say, was presented for the first time in a little book that came out in 1997 called Drawing Time, which was edited by Gussak and Vershup. Now, many inmates inside are driven to create, despite knowing that the pieces they make outside of a sanctioned program might be confiscated or destroyed. Using the creative process to escape from their surroundings, many inmates will create regardless of this limitation. Now, art is a natural byproduct of the prison system within an environment where libidinal impulses and the need for escape run supreme. Ellen Dissanayake indicated way back in '92 that the same libidinal impulses that drive one to aggressive acts also compels one to create. And the face of destruction is creation. Now, Dissanayake, I had an opportunity to see Dissanayake say this back in 1994, and that's been my mantra ever since, that the art within the system allows the opportunity to contain and redirect aggressive drives, libidinal impulses, and the need for escape. Many people here in this room, in this Zoom room, have created art, and I would guess all of you would contend that you might be creating an art piece, and before you know it, 2 or 3 hours have gone by, or 2 or 3 days. I don't judge, but in that sense, you were able to escape. You were able to get outside of your surroundings and get back into your own head. Now, I'm going to show you many, many images of art pieces done by those inside that were created without facilitation. Many of the pieces you will see were discovered and some were rescued. Now, why did they need rescuing? Because oftentimes creating an unsanctioned piece, quote unquote, is tantamount to contraband. It could be confiscated and destroyed. But these pieces you will see were created despite knowing this, knowing that they could and would likely be destroyed. There were those that the ones that I'm showing you, of course, had happy endings, for these are the pieces that were rescued. I can't imagine the amount of art that has been destroyed because we weren't able to get them out. Now, such creation of art goes back as long as the history of prison itself. We see art pieces, we see drawings and paintings on the walls of the catacombs done by those waiting execution by the reigning monarchs, trying to leave something behind after they are destroyed. Now, this next one is one of my favorite pieces. It was found at the excavation of a Pennsylvania prison that was built in 1829. The excavation yielded many handicrafts, specifically wooden toys, figurines, and gaming pieces. This was created by an unknown artist during that excavation. And can anyone guess? Normally I would ask, can anyone guess what this is carved from? The shape of the piece, just somebody shout it out. Does anybody know what this is carved from?
Is it bone?
Who said bone?
My name's Jenna.
Wonderful, Jenna. That is disgusting, and I can't believe you said that. But no, it is not bone. But it's an excellent guess. It's an excellent guess. It actually, if you take a close look at it, it was actually sculpted from a matchstick. And this is miraculous to me, the fact that during the excavation, so there's two pieces here. One thing that I'm fascinated about and very grateful for is that they were able to very carefully excavate this from the site. What we have here is a carving of William Penn as seen at the top of the Capitol, of the courthouse in Philadelphia. He carved the actual figure of William Penn sitting at the top of the matchstick. So I'm grateful that they were able to rescue this piece. I'm also grateful that at this excavation site, nobody was smoking and they didn't need a light. So we were able to rescue the piece. It survives. We have it today, and it's at the Eastern Penitentiary Museum. Thank you, Jennifer, for going out there. That's an excellent guess. I've heard all sorts of suggestions of what this could be. It's just miraculous. Here is a piece that was rescued by Laura Bedard. Now, Laura Bedard, way back when, was the deputy director of the Florida Department of Corrections, later a warden. Now she's with Seminole County Sheriff's Office. And she recognized the power of art and would often rescue the pieces rather than be destroyed. This was a piece that was slated to be destroyed because it was considered contraband. Now, it was considered contraband because A, the person made it out of found objects that was not sanctioned by the setting. Also because it's hollow and you could hide things in and smuggle things out. But what's amazing about this piece is that it was created out of cardboard, pen caps, and garbage bags. There's absolutely no glue holding this piece together. It's all sewn together along the edges by garbage bags. The strings are made from garbage bags stretched thin, and the pen pieces are the actual pegs on the top part of the guitar. The bridge is made out of gum foil and painted with shoe polish and marker. It is what I would guess would be life size. It's the large of the large regular size guitar. The only problem with this guitar is that it actually can't hold a tune, but that's all right. So it's actually Dr. Bedard rescues these pieces, and she takes them not knowing where they can go because she does rescue a great many pieces. And she figures that Gussak will go ahead and be willing to hold on to them. So my office has almost become a mini museum to many of these pieces, including this one. This was a piece that was discovered by an art therapy intern over at a local over at a local prison. This was a piece in which the artist basically smuggled into his cell many stones from the yard and found cardboard and constructed this log cabin. I have it here in my office. It's extremely heavy. If you look through the windows, you can actually see spiral staircases and furniture. What's remarkable about this piece is that he didn't have access to glue, and so he put the whole thing together and managed to glue it together using non-dairy creamer, which on one hand is an amazingly innovative. On the other hand, it makes me worry about what I put into my own body. But after all of these years, I've had it for about 8 years, and it stands firm on my shelf. This was a piece that was slated to be destroyed. I was able to get it out simply by walking it through the gate. This was a piece that was displayed at a museum in Philadelphia. This was made out of toilet paper, toothpaste, soft soap, jute, and shoe polish. And you could see some of the hemp going through the lines there that was taken out of a seat cushion to line the mask. The same artist who did that one did this piece. That first one was called Mask. This one, the artist named it himself. It is called, as their own tongue-in-cheek notion, it's called Don't Drop the Soap. But it was very similarly done as the previous piece, using pen ink to color in the blue squares. You'll see this next piece. It doesn't mean that they have to be remarkable artists. They just have to be they just have to have the creative drive. Many of the sculptures that we see are made from soap, and they're either carved with sharpened toothbrushes and sticks in and of itself, contraband within the prison, or they're softened with water and then shaped by hand. You'll see this one was likely shaped and then colored with shoe polish, and some shoe polish mixed with other pigments and ink that they were able to get their hands on. We see this one is often, we'll see a lot of elephants within the prison system. And I thought it was a clever symbol or a indication of certain preferences or notions of always remember, never forget. So I asked a number of the inmates inside why they constructed elephants out of soap, again, imagining that there would be a lengthy discourse on symbols. Turns out they said because it's the most easily recognizable animal they can create. That just by simply putting ears and a trunk on it, you immediately know that this is an elephant. So I have this sitting on my shelf here. It's one of my favorite pieces. And of course, and also, you know, if for any reason I run out of soap, I have a ready supply here. I know I shouldn't have said that. That's blasphemy. I'm going to tell you a story, however. One of my an interesting situation occurred, or I should say, not situation, but I'm going to provide a prime example of someone who took a murderous label and found a way to make meaning and self-identity within the limitations of the materials that he was granted. Now, this was done. I received this next series of pieces over in the past 6 or 7 years. About 7 or 8 years ago, I received an envelope in the mail here on campus. My work is out there. I had a blog on Psychology Today that was spread far and wide. There were many articles. And so I would often get envelopes or letters from inmates from all around the country wanting to know if they can establish art and art therapy within their settings. But I received this fairly large manila envelope from this person named John Blasey, and it had his prison ID number in the upper left corner and which prison he was from. And when I opened up this envelope, this unusual aroma wafted towards me. Now, when I say that and I start that, people automatically suspect what that aroma might be if you're receiving an envelope from a prison. However, it was a very sweet aroma. And what it turned out was that this was a person who didn't have access to many of the painting supplies, but he learned how to paint sharing a cell with one of the Florida Highwaymen. Now, the Florida Highwaymen were a well-known group of self-taught landscape artists. There were around 26 African-American men who relied on cheap construction materials for their media. John Blasey learned a great deal from him, and he later read an article about someone who did something similar using similar materials to create his paintings. And what he did was he actually created the paintings using M&M shells. And so he couldn't get his hands on painting pigments, so he would mix and make pigments from M&M shells and then would paint them using locks of his hair as his paintbrush. Now, according to John Blasey, who I later dubbed in a blog post the Candyman, and when I had written to him to explain and ask him permission to use his information for this post, I indicated I wished to call him the Candyman. He took that as his own moniker and signs all of his letters by that name. Now, this is a person who had been in prison for more than 30 years for a murder that he indicated that he did not commit. Now, after 30 years, if they're still standing so adamantly by his own innocence, I tend to think that there might be something to that. But he uses his own art as his way to hold on to his own identity and as a way to escape from his surroundings. Now, some of the things that he would tell me in his letters are, and these are direct quotes, "What's the price for enjoying oneself and getting satisfaction? I get a natural high off doing my artwork. Many times it has pulled me through these years, especially when receiving bad news or something like losing a loved one. Prison is a very negative and lonely place where one can't afford to wear their feelings on their sleeves. The artwork has played a major part in my life in here. What prompted me, was I needed something that I could feel good about, something constructive that I could see results, actually knowing that I could create something for a moment in time. I could look back and see what I had accomplished, having to show for. So many in prison have had so much idle time and choosing to waste it. I choose differently." He also added, "I cannot change what has happened in the past, only to learn from it, as sadly as that is." Here's another one of his pieces that he used M&M shells for the pigment. Also used pen ink to outline some of the trees. Here's another one of his pieces. And this piece here. Now, I want to point out that if we see something like this, it looks typical for the type of work that we might see in certain lower level galleries, perhaps on the corners of certain beach areas, and we may not take a second look at it. But the minute we recognize it as a piece done by somebody inside, particularly within the limitations of what he had, we see something remarkable, a chance to just rise above all the limitations that he had. I'm going to describe to you someone who is considered the most violent inmate. Basically, what I had indicated is liberated through art. It focuses on the person most notoriously violent inmate in England. And a lot of my work and understanding of his work comes from direct correspondence with this person who took on the name Charles Bronson. Initially, Bronson seemed to revel in the original identity that labeled him as incorrigibly violent. Now, what's interesting about Bronson was that he was arrested. His name at the time that he was arrested was Michael Peterson, but he was arrested for a non-violent crime. However, once he was incarcerated into the British penal system, he actually became violent. He saw it as a need to survive inside. And so once he got out of prison, he was only out of prison for about 47 days, but he held on to that identity of becoming violent inside and was rearrested and brought back inside. Once he was brought back inside, he took on the name Charles Bronson because he saw that as something that captured his aggressive persona. Through a single fortuitous interaction, Bronson eventually found art and began to redefine who he was. What happened was Bronson had already been in prison for some time, but because of a number of violent acts, including taking an art teacher hostage, he was given 40 years sentence, including all of that time would be placed in seclusion. He had never murdered anybody, basically never killed anybody in prison, and yet he's put essentially in a life imprisonment in seclusion. He remains in seclusion to this day. a correctional officer had read somewhere that creating art can be a way to calm a person, and so gave Bronson a cheap set of art materials. He found basically used these materials to begin drawing, begin creating his own, what later became fairly amusing autobiographical images. And they became a way for him to capture his own experience. This section really emphatically illustrates the essence and the benefits of art making on the violent offender. So as he started creating art, he actually about 15 years ago decided to change his name because he started recognizing that the art itself really allowed him to come to his own peaceful persona. And so he took the name of his favorite artist, Salvador Dali, and changed his name to Charles Salvador. So while Salvador is not any less aggressive, he has certainly become less violent, simply through the act of sublimating and redirecting his aggressive impulses to humorous and pointed creative expressions. He has in essence relabeled himself. Here are some of his pieces. This is one of his autobiographical pieces. He considers himself the poet from hell. We see this piece where it's called Con Artist by Charles Bronson. The character here, which is a self-portrait of himself as the artist, says, "I swapped my saw off for a brush. Now I'm a born-again artist, a true creator. Who are you?" We also see this piece where he's hanging from the top of the line as if he's being contained within. As he recounted, and I was able to converse with him, or I should say, have a conversation with him through writing. The way that I could do this is that I would send him an email through the prison email system. He would write a lengthy letter, send it to his fiancée. His fiancée would take photos of it and email me copies of these photos. As he recounted about his artwork, "I taught myself from within the bowels of hell, and is the one thing that makes me a better man. I now live for art. It's my life, my world, my dreams. I get visions in my sleep. I wake excited to start a new piece of art. My masterpiece probably won't happen until I'm freed, if ever. That art would be painted with the sun on my back and the breeze on my face, on grass flowers, close by a dog, birds singing, a butterfly. My heart will feel like a rainbow as I create it. That keeps me going." Ultimately, he finds that quote, "When I'm creating, I feel sane." Here's one of his large pieces that was constructed from a poem that he wrote for his then fiancée. And this was one of the pieces that indicates, of course, I actually believe that Rest in Pieces should have an end date on it, as around 2010 is when he became Charles Salvador. However, I'm not naive, and I want to point this out. I recognize that there were many instances during the time that he was creating his art that he displayed some acting out against the system. Art making is not a panacea. Engaging in the art, while valuable, did not magically turn aside his deviant behaviors. However, the ongoing pursuit of creating art over time provided awareness, redirection, restructuring, and an acceptable voice when one was simply not available for him. Now, Salvador recognized what the art making meant for him, and he saw how important it would be for him to continue to create in order to find solace. But it's also important to recognize the reality of a situation. Salvador will continue to experience many frustrations and undesirable situations that could very well result in a less than stellar reaction. He seemed clear on this possibility and saw the battles he would likely continue to face. On the other hand, to the cynical, his recent peace-loving tendencies may have been a way to manipulate the system into believing he has redeemed his ways and is worthy of release. However, even this may be besides the point, whether it is truly a redemption or merely an act. As long as Salvador continues his peaceful mantra and makes art, successfully channeling this energy into his productions and finding the proper audience and acceptance for his work, then Salvador could very well be liberated, figuratively and literally. I'm going to show you a series of pieces from an art show called Art from Guantanamo Bay, Ode to the Sea. This was in an exhibition from 2018 of art from those detained in Guantanamo Bay. It appeared at the President's Gallery at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York from October 2017 until January 2018. Now, this exhibition featured the work of 8 detainees from the infamous Guantanamo Bay detention facility. The name of the exhibition centers on one central theme: there was a brief exposure to the sea. While they were in an institution that is essentially right on the ocean, most of the detainees have never seen the water. They're kept in isolation the entire time. Any potential visual access to the outside was blocked with tarps. It was only when these tarps were removed for several days in 2014, due to a threat of a hurricane, did they see the expansive sea. The brief exposure was so impactful that these artists chose to reflect what they felt and saw through their art, many of which contain images of water. The prisoner's attorneys approached John Jay College arts crimes professor Erin Thompson to inform her about their creative output. She recognized that creativity is a basic human desire and provides a way to get you out of yourself. And so she believed in the rehabilitative value of art making and subsequent display. So she went through a great deal of struggles and controversy to create this exhibition to remind us of the humanity that lives inside these walls that we are so quick to forget. But she also realized how careful she had to not impose her own meaning and biases onto the work that emerged. So during our conversation, I had several conversations with Dr. Thompson. She stressed that in developing the exhibition, she really tries to think very hard about how to work with these oppressed voices and not to substitute my voices for theirs. And that's key. We let the art speak for them themselves. We're not going to impose our own meaning onto them. And we're not going to exploit these images for the betterment of our own advancement, but rather use it as a way to bridge the inside to the outside. I've been lucky enough to be exposed to many formal prison arts programs. Some of them are actually represented within this audience, I'm very happy to say. That also includes the Arts and Corrections program in California. It's the first of its kind in the United States, and was the first to conduct comprehensive studies on the benefits of art in prison. We also have the Prison Creative Arts Program, founded in 1990. It comes out of the University of Michigan. Bring those impacted by the justice system and the University of Michigan community together into artistic collaboration for mutual learning and development. And that is fascinating when you can bring, again, as a bridge between the outside and the inside, a way to use art as a means to connect and break through those walls. We have the Prison Arts Coalition. It's an independent space and a national network providing information and resources for people creating art in and around the American prison system all over. And there's the Prison Arts Collective, also in California, at the University of San Bernardino. This next one you're going to hear about a little bit later, called the Arts in Prison Berlin program, and it's the association of art in prison that actually has been expanded worldwide, but I'll introduce that to you in just a little bit. We have, I believe, one or two people here from Kansas, and they're probably very familiar with Arts in Prison, which involves Kansas state prisons and detention facilities. Their mission is, as a positive experience, allows an inmate, incarcerated person to begin to have hope, and hope is what allows them to believe that they will get out of prison and that they will lead positive and productive lives on the outside. Several groups that I've gotten a chance to work with directly, I've been able to provide some support with such groups like Maria Maneos's program up in New Jersey, Brush with the Law. And then there's the Creative Arts Platform program at the Federal Correctional Institution in Florence, otherwise known by many as the Alcatraz of the West, which I think is ironic because Alcatraz of the desert, I think. Sorry, Alcatraz is already west, but it is a high-level correctional system, and you'll still see that some amazing pieces have come out of there. My new friend and colleague, Justin Reddick, is the person who puts this together. He is a chaplain as well as the artist facilitator, seeing the value of art that comes for those inside. There's also the Arts in Prison Berlin. There was essentially in 2006, former Ukrainian, now Parisian filmmaker Inga Lavore-Kavkina was coming out of a church where she went to admire Caravaggio's work in Rome, Italy, when she stumbled upon the first international exhibition of art created in prisons, curated by Peter Echtemeyer. Echtemeyer is a chaplain from a prison in Berlin and saw the value of the work that he saw created inside naturally. So he began to collect the pieces with the intent to display them. And that started with just the artwork coming out of Berlin. After talking with Echtemeyer for some time, Inga was so moved by the work that she decided to create a documentary that would feature Echtemeyer and his work. With her husband, former banker Bruno Lavole, they began the prison documentary, Half a Square Meter of Freedom. That's how I got a chance to meet them. They actually came to the United States, and I became one of the talking heads of this documentary called Half a Square Meter of Freedom. These were some of the pieces that were exhibited in the show. I'll tell you about this piece in just a moment, but this was quite a remarkable experience that I had by attending one of the shows. Inga and Bruno decided in late 2013 to bring this collection to Paris and open it with a roundtable discussion with various people from an array of different backgrounds, but who all had one thing in common: the understanding of the necessity and value of art in prison. Along with Echtemeyer, Tim Robertson, who is the CEO of the Kessler Trust, which is a major nonprofit organization known as the United Kingdom's, quote, best-known prison arts charity, and Arnaud Gouliard, a Parisian sociologist who specialized in imprisonment. I was lucky to be one of those invited, and this roundtable and art opening became one of the final segments of the completed documentary. What was remarkable is that I had a chance to go to this gallery show. I had never seen the work in person, and I came across that piece here and recognized the artist immediately. This was a piece that was created just several years before for the show, but this artist was someone I had actually worked with in Northern California about 15 years before, still doing very similar pieces. That's how I recognized the artist, through the self-portrait and also by the name that was on the tag. This is one of my favorite pieces because as I look back on the video and I'm in the roundtable, this piece was looking directly over my right shoulder, staring at me at the whole time to make sure that I was representing their work well. This is one of my favorite pieces. So in sum, art gives a voice to those who would not or could not otherwise be heard. Art is accepted and recognized as valuable to society. Those who engage in it are seen as contributing to its success. To be seen as one who creates rather than one who destroys defies the previously established repressive label. And art helps recreate affirming identities. We can fortify the most vulnerable and strengthen the community. Art making becomes the vehicle to which the disenfranchised can travel. Art creates empathy and emotional connection. And creating art provides a sense of accomplishment and promotes success. And art creates a visual bridge between the outside and inside. Now, if we accept these demonstrative premises, and you can see how art therapy plays a role in strengthening and redefining a community simply through its socialization, becoming the positive symbolic connection within the desired interactions. So I want to underscore a strongly held belief, and this is before I go to the next session. If a community wishes to continue widening the margin between the empowered and the disenfranchised, then eliminate the arts. However, if the goal is to strengthen its social fabric, then the arts, and then in turn art therapy, provides the opportunity to create a tapestry in which everyone is woven. And that includes bringing back into the fold those that we have so successfully disenfranchised. If we start paying attention to those locked up inside, we can start reversing the detrimental effects of the prison systems. Now, for the fun of it, I want to talk about how arts and corrections leads to art therapy in prison. Now, early on, there was very little available about the benefits of art therapy in prison. One of the earliest ones was by Claire Levy, which was an article in 1978 about art therapy with a woman in prison. It just so happened to be a case study that happened to take place with a woman in prison without really underscoring the value of what it is that we can bring inside. One of the more valuable pieces later came in Harriet Waitzon's book, Advances in Art Therapy, written by Elizabeth Day and Greg Honorato, an art therapist and psychologist who together wrote the article on art therapy in a jail setting. We have Marion Liebman's 1994 book, which was the first comprehensive book on art therapy in prison that took place in the United Kingdom. As a reaction to that book and a response to that book, some guy named Gussak and Versham came together and created the first comprehensive book on art therapy in North America. And what we delineated in that, now what we tried to do in that book was to really start underscoring what are the specific advantages, the benefits of art therapy within the correctional system. And these were the ones that we came up with. So these became the scaffolding of all of my work for the past 30 years. Now, to underscore, I've been involved with corrections for 33 years. And with very little variations, these remain for me the specific advantages for art therapy inside, for which actually emerges the basis of this discussion. What we start with is that art in and of itself cathartes and sublimates aggression and violence. We recognize that it promotes nonverbal communication, even while the inmate does not want to talk about the feelings and ideas which might leave them vulnerable. Inside a correctional institution, the very admittance of any weakness and vulnerability may be taken advantage of by someone else. However, we still need an opportunity to have them learn to express themselves, and we need to do that by leaving the mask that they create inside in place. The wonderful thing about art therapy is that we can work behind the mask in order to bring and mitigate any of the obstacles that they're experiencing. So we're able to provide an opportunity for basically exploration and self-discovery, as well as to start mitigating the mental illness that they may very well be experiencing inside. We can use the art and the art therapy to bypass defenses, including dishonesty. One question that I always ask my audiences is, do those inside lie? Yes, but do they tell the truth? Absolutely. The thing is, sometimes we can't always tell what that is. However, the art allows us to be able to, basically what we recognize as art doesn't lie, right? We know that what they're communicating, what they're experiencing, what they're expressing through the art is a lot more, we can trust what it is that they're presenting, even without requiring words. Now, we also recognize that the art can provide necessary diversion and emotional escape, and it permits them to express themselves in a manner acceptable to both the prison and the outside culture. This one is, of course, underscored. It reestablishes an identity above that of the inmate, and it works despite organicity and the low educational levels and illiteracy, other obstacles to such verbal communication and cognitive development that occurs inside. And so we recognize that there are many limitations to communication inside. The art allows us to connect and give them an avenue for expression. Such benefits have been explored in various research studies. So these theories have indeed led to research, because just because you write it doesn't mean it's true. You now have to support it. And so a number of studies were conducted from 2003 to 2009, which were actually a series of pre and post assessment empirical studies conducted to ascertain change in men and women. And we recognize that over time, they revealed significant decrease in depression, increase in mood, increase in internal locus of control, as well as problem solving and socialization skills. This has led to a great many advancements over time. Since those articles, I'm very excited to point out that there's been an increase in research endeavors, and that is globally, including my colleagues across the pond, Jess Collier and Aaron Leng, are doing a lot of work in Europe. There are many more art therapists in correctional environments. Greater interest and acceptance in art therapy in prisons from outside our field. And that's very important for us to be able to disseminate our work far and wide so that we can create interdisciplinary dynamics and relationships. And dare I say, this very presentation is an example of that. How do we interconnect with people outside of our field to be able to underscore the value of what it is that we do? And there's an increase in dissertation and thesis studies that have been focusing on forensics. And of course, there's a marked increase in publications, including, dare I say it, yay. And admittedly, that was a shameless plug. But I do want to introduce to you a wonderful team that's going to take this work much, much further. These are my colleagues that are the art therapists, boots on the ground for the Florida State University, Florida Department of Corrections Art Therapy and Prisons program. This program would not exist without the direct partnership with the Florida Department of Corrections, including our colleague, Anna Schubarth, who's the program manager in education. This program has expanded over the past 4 years to where we now have 4 full-time art therapists in 9 prisons throughout the state of Florida. We're hoping to expand that again this coming summer. I'm also working closely with colleagues in Texas and North Dakota to bring this program, similar programs to those states. And my rationale is if I can make this happen in Texas, Florida, and North Dakota, the entire country is ours. We're also working closely with, I get to work closely with people on international levels. I'm working with a number of art therapists in India, and we're working on our first publication about the value of art therapy in a women's prison out there in India. I'm also coordinating and working closely with people in Korea and in China, basically all over the world. So with that note, I'd like to give special thanks to my wonderful new friends with ARTIVISM, Argy Aguilar, and Carolina Cambronero, and Stephanie Lake. And of course, special thanks to my graduate assistant who's sitting right here to make sure I don't make a complete fool of myself, Anastasia Baran. And on that note, are there any questions?
I wasn't here for the first part. I just joined. With both paintings do represent the inmates' feelings, right? Do the paintings that the inmates draw, are those connected to their emotions?
Some of them are connected to their emotions. Some of them are certainly reflections of certain tasks that we may ask of them. There are certain products or certain processes that we design that specifically engage in problem solving and socialization. For example, one of my favorite directives is I'll sometimes give them nothing but white paper and glue sticks. And essentially, what I request of them is to make something out of that. And what they soon come to realize is that despite the fact that they're given very little, they see how varied and how different theirs are to the person next to them, which reinforces their own sense of identity, their own sense of separation, and that they can start recognizing that despite being given very little, they can make something of value, something that could be accepted from them.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. What other questions do we have?
Before we go to more questions, I just
Oh,
want
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So we can leave more time for, questions and a conversation. I just want to remind everyone, if you would like to present at ARTIVISM, you can email us at artivism@adelphi.edu. For upcoming events, you could just Google ARTIVISM Transformation or ARTIVISM Adelphi, and you will find us. This coming Saturday, October 21st, is the opening of the final Wearable Art for a Purpose show. It's a multi-venue exhibition, and it will be at Teatro Yerba Brujas Gallery in Bayshore, New York. This will conclude the exhibition's rotation for the season. Thank you to our other venues, the Offutt Gallery and Adelphi University. Next Monday, October 23rd, Professor Bart Leet from Australia will open up a conversation about the role community music can play in addressing entrenched social inequality. For more information and upcoming events, go to adelphi.edu/artivism. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram on Artivism for the number 4 Shared Humanity, and I'll put it in the chat. And you can see this presentation probably in a day or so, and others. I believe there are, we've had over 100 presenters so far. This is our 6th season, and there are over 85 videos up there that you can view from artivists, just like Dave, you are now an artivist, over the past 3 years. And that is on YouTube, again, Artivism, the number 4 for Shared Humanity. Yes, so now questions, comments. I'm sure we have many. I have a few. Anyone else?
And there were some questions. Yes. In the chat I just want to bring up.
Yes, please.
Elizabeth Erkin asked if the rocks were made out of cardboard. They were actually rocks that they were able to bring in. He was able to bring into a cell. And I see a few people did identify as in a matchstick. So Kachina and Sheila, you have both won. Congratulations. And let's see. And Stephanie was reminding everybody that this is sociology. So indeed, it was. What questions do we have? This is my fun part.
I did have a question. Hi. I'm curious if you can add insight to group work versus individual work. Certainly. And or if you do have a group, how do you kind of contain the spectrum of behaviors? or abilities or work, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily control the spectrum of behaviors. I think the art does the work for itself in a group. I do run, and I have run, and my colleagues run individual and group sessions, and both are valuable for very different reasons. But even within the group dynamic, which I think is kind of something that a lot of people are often get concerned about until they're actually in the group and they see that here's an opportunity for them to. This is where the strength of art and art therapy as a means of developing problem solving and socialization come into effect. And the reality is the art does. I'm going to make a confession here. I'm going to make a confession, Alicia, and I appreciate you bringing this out to me. The reason I'm an art therapist is because I'm essentially a very lazy person. And because of that, I let the art do all the work for me. And so in a group, the art and how the art is directed, how the art is set up, the materials that I'm providing, the environment that I'm setting up, that in and of itself creates the trajectory for a therapeutic goal, whatever those goals might be. And so oftentimes in a group dynamic, there's not a great deal of talking afterwards, unless they choose to, about what they've created, about what they've made. Essentially, all of them recognize the value of each other's work, and they all know that it is a privilege for them to be in that session. And so they work very hard to stay focused and stay engaged. One of the deliverables that we have to do in our prison program is to increase the overall programming of the youthful offenders that we're working with. And we're able to demonstrate that that engaging in the art process and learning to socialize and problem solve with one another through the art making actually permeates throughout all of their dynamics, through all of their group interactions. So the art processes that we use, because, and dare I say a dirty word, but we're therapists, we do manipulate. So the very act of us manipulating the actual setup, that does the work for us. And that keeps them engaged and present and focused. And rarely do we see any acting out behavior in sessions, except from say from another art therapist that I might be working with. They can be, art therapists are just generally mean. Okay, I take back that last one because otherwise you'll all hurt me. Alicia.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there was a question, I believe Jane Bloom was asking a question here. How often does the healing of past trauma of incarcerated people overlap with the work of recreating identity? I would dare say that there's it's happening simultaneously. What we're doing is reversing the past neglect and the past rejection and the past trauma that they're experiencing, and re-engaging in new social dynamics and social identity. But I'm also now working with and Cam, and some of you may recognize this, a lot of you may recognize this. I've been in communication with Linda Gant with the instinctual trauma response and how that might overlap with some of the work that we're doing within the correctional settings. We're not necessarily bringing that into our program, but there's a lot of overlap on how the art process brings about healing and trauma, and how we inside, recognizing that many of them have the trauma that got them there, by recreating new sense of identity, by acceptance, by bridging, by removing the detrimental labels and recreating new ones, we're able to start healing some of the traumatic responses that they've had in the past. That's an excellent question. Terry, oh, Terry's here. Hello. You have a question, you have your hand up.
Yes, I would suggest that it's not a matter of being lazy. I think it's our job to delegate authority.
Agreed, but I was just trying to be tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, I caught that.
Yeah, I agree, and I would even argue, dare I say it, art therapy is probably one of the more, it can be quite difficult and challenging, and certainly those of us inside can't be lazy. We recognize that while we're turning the power over to the art, but it's our job to monitor that and oversee it. We'll come back to Jane. I believe Jane had a follow-up question, but we're going to go to Natalia after this. She has her hand up. Hello, good to see you.
Hi, how are you?
I have no idea.
Okay, so I wanted to ask what the biggest difference, I guess, if you've noticed over time in drawings between male facilities and women facilities, and if there are any that you've seen, or how art therapy differs.
That's an excellent question. There's actually a follow-up study that was done, and I can go into a large discourse, and I have, about working with men and women inside. And now that we recognize, although the institutions that we work with inside don't recognizing the gender fluidity that exists, we often see different responses to the art processes and the engagement in the group dynamics. There was an article that took the ongoing research further. With the ongoing research that we did in 2009, we had populations from men and women's prisons to demonstrate changes in value of those, the advantages of art therapy in all of those settings. But we found and discovered was that the women actually did better, and they responded with higher differences in pre and post scores than the men. And naturally, I thought that makes sense. The women were smarter. And so that they would, if I can start humming a Caribbean tune. But so I thought, well, that's because they were benefit greater from the art therapy and the creativity. Turns out when we re-examined the data, that wasn't the case, that the numbers, the post scores were actually very similar to one another. It was the pre-test, pre-assessments that were extremely different. So we administered the a Beck Depression Inventory and the Nowicki-Strickland Locus of Control and various questionnaires. And what we found was that, much as the literature indicated, women actually demonstrated or were willing to admit to greater depression than the men. Therefore, their scores were much lower, and that they had a much more external locus of control, and that was reflected in many of the crimes that they engaged in. So many of their crimes were indeed externally motivated, whereas men, as twisted as this sounds, their crimes were much more internally motivated. So there was an internal locus of control that was greater with the men. So what we'll see in the process, as the groups start to evolve, the men may be a little bit more competitive than the women, who form more familial dynamics within their groups. And so there's going to be a different type of cohesion and basically a greater, it's much, the process of socialization and group dynamics occurs much quicker with some of the women's groups. Now, I'm not going to do a blanket statement, although I recognize I just did, but you're going to see it that much quicker with the women than the men, because they're already developing their own familial dynamics within their own dorms, within their own cells and their own units. So part of that is starting to work on individual identity and being able to be independent and self-sufficient, whereas the men, it's just the other side. We're trying to engage in them in a much more group process and get them to start to rely on one another. So that's an excellent question. What I would recommend is there is a chapter in that book. Just reach out to me and I'll get you something in the chapter or something like that, where we take a look at the women inside. And Jane had a follow-up question. Have I ever done work that brings incarcerated people and correction staff together to build empathy? Absolutely. There are some directives that we've done. There was one project we did. This was exciting, where we did a mural project in a small little town in Georgia. Actually, Amanda Sanders may remember this from way back when, where we brought jail inmates out into the community and put them on the wall to make a painting or to do a large mural that took about 6 weeks. Julie Argue and Jackie Bennett actually headed this up, and many of the officers, many of the community people would be there to watch it, to witness it. Many of the officers will sometimes, when we did these murals inside the prisons, some of the officers would come in on this. We're trying to facilitate opportunities for those types of dynamics. I do know that there are certain opportunities where we're trying to actually establish workshops for the officers and the staff inside, so they can see the experiences that the inmates may have. So that will also help facilitate empathy between the groups. And then Terry asks, when will the programs you've been talking about be brought to Wisconsin? Terry, when you and I begin speaking. I would love to do something with Mount Mary University. Absolutely. And actually, if I recall, Terry, I was on 1 or 2 doctoral dissertations up there where they were engaged in some forensic work, if I remember that correctly.
That would have been before my time. I just started.
I think he's still muted. I can't.
I'm just in my 3rd semester of grad school now, so I would have
something wrong with sound. Can someone else speak? Just I want to make sure I can still hear sound.
Yeah, do you hear us?
Yeah.
No?
I don't hear anything.
Yeah.
Argy, can you say something?
Yeah. You don't
I'm
hear
not-
us?
Oh, let me
Hear us
do
now?
this. Try again, please.
Do you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay.
My computer decided to rebel against me. I'm sorry, Terry. What were you saying?
I was just saying, I'm in my third semester of grad school in the art therapy program here.
All the
Yeah.
more reason.
Yeah, and from the beginning, I've had real strong feelings about taking this into the prison systems, as I've been volunteering in one of the local medium security prisons for like the last 20 years, and it's non art therapy based, but I could definitely see taking art therapy into the prison.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, we have Andrea Davis here who intends to bring this into the Texas prisons. And so we'll go north, we'll go south. And I see Bevan Classon is from Canadian prisons. And I had the wonderful opportunity of years ago going to Toronto and doing the keynote up there and meeting a lot of the art therapists in Canada, Beth Miriam, whatnot, an old colleague of mine who has been doing some amazing work in Canada. So it's happening, it's spreading out, it's going all over the place. So that's wonderful. And so Terry, let's as you start moving through, let's chat. Yeah, I think we have time for about 32 more questions. So who's got the next one? I'm here all day.
How does the US compare to other programs globally?
We have, I'm sure this will come as no surprise. We have some challenges that certain countries, like for example, the United Kingdom actually incorporates art therapy into their system nationwide. It's actually built into their structures and policy. Given that we have 50 unique systems, and within each system, the prisons themselves create their own fiefdom and dynamics, that it's that much more complicated to get it set up. So there are challenges, and we're in a system that's built on this hierarchical structure and control system. And it's not for me to say at this point, I'll say it in other places, whether it's working or not, but the challenges that are faced inside make it that much more difficult for us to provide opportunities to give them a voice. I will say this, I've been involved with prisons for 33 years. It was about about 10, 15 years worth of consistent research. And it was around 2018 or 19 where the Department of Corrections approached me after reading some of the work and said, we want to establish this program. And then it took us 20 months to negotiate just that one contract. The amusing thing, I'm going to tell this story where I finally had the contract to the point where I could get signatures so I can hire the art therapists. Some of them are here in this meeting. So to bring them on board, Casey Barlow and Evie Soap. And so I had the interim chair at the time sign the form. 3 weeks later, I said, by the way, thank you for signing those forms. We're now able to start the art therapists on site. He said, oh, that was fast. And I said, yeah, it's only taken me 22 years. So it's a slow process to get to where we are, but we have to be tenacious. There's another chapter that I've just done for some colleagues who are writing a book about arts and corrections. And the name of the chapter is called, practice to research to policy, to practice to research ad nausea, because it's an ongoing cycle and we have to continue developing and continue researching it and continue having that inform our policy to make the changes that are occurring. I think now is the time, there's Casey, now is the time for us to really continue this work. There's so many people here that I've had an opportunity to communicate with over the past few years. There's Emma, there's Liz, there's all of you that's done some amazing, there's Mitra is here that's doing some wonderful work in corrections. You need to continue it and push it forward. And I'm ready to move aside because all of you need to just explode. So it's growing, it's going to change, and soon we'll catch up to the United Kingdom, and we'll catch up to Europe. And there are some programs that China is doing that I think is fascinating that we need to start considering as a model. So for a really long answer, could have been potentially a short answer, but you know me by now, we're different and we have a lot of challenges, but we could also use those to our benefit.
And just as a quick note, we have Felipe Vega here from Costa Rica, who work, there he is. Hi, Felipe.
Hello, Felipe.
Hello.
Maybe you'd like to speak very quickly about your work.
So I've been an art therapist in the prison in Costa Rica for the Juan Carlos's art transformation program for peace. So he disassembles weaponry and reassembles it into art, and he has taken his program into the prison. And we have also worked with meditation program along as well with music program for multiple therapists to work and they are very effective. Something very interesting to give a follow-up to is the processes, right? For example, this inmate you were mentioning previously, right? How do these cases how do they unfold throughout the years? Because there we could have better better theory upon this to show to the rest of the people, because we know it works. It's pretty efficient and it must be done, because if not, then prisons become a school for other negative things.
Yes.
So when we connect ourselves through art, even colors express emotions, and so nature or the nature of the colors themselves will give us this perception of connecting our ego to the natural process. So it is very effective. It is crucial to happen all around the world. And thank you, Dave, for all of your hard work, because as you mentioned, it takes many years, and Juan Carlos is also one of those people who have worked throughout the years, and having to go through all of those bureaucracies and an intricate maze of problem solving to get there, to be able to help other souls. And I think this is the key aspect of this this endeavor. Thank you, Dave.
Well, thank you so much. And I think you underscored something that is so very important. The importance of getting this work out there and getting those cases as they unfold. And none of this happens overnight, but we have to, all of us, I think, we have a responsibility, a social responsibility to get the word out, and not just, amongst ourselves because we're preaching to the choir. We go out there and we disseminate this far and wide, and we publish and we present, and we get that going so that people can see this value and see the step-by-step procedures. We need to figure out unique ways to research this. But I really appreciate you saying that, Felipe, and I would love to learn more about your program. Let's get a chance to chat more. That's awesome. This is my happy face. Excellent. Look at this. I see some people that I've known for long. This is wonderful. What else do we have? I think we have time for one more question. It's Cam. It's wonderful to see you here. Look at that.
Great to see you and hear you and learn from you. And I love the interdisciplinary approach. That's my favorite. And really spreading the word and getting things out there. This is great work, Dave.
Wow.
Known you for a very long time.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Cam and I were on the board together back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a lot taller.
Great seeing all these faces too.
I know, this is great. Like
Yeah.
Amanda Sanders is here, one of my former doctoral students. Amanda's doing great work on trauma experiences around the country. She's just doing great. This is amazing. It's like an old reunion. You guys talk amongst yourselves. Any final thoughts or questions before? And here's Argy's providing the link here.
That's the link to Felipe's presentation. If anybody's
wonderful.
interested in seeing the work that Felipe does and his his associates. And if you were interested in seeing some of the works created from those weapons, the guns that are taken apart and created, it's just beautiful. And the power of music. You know, they showed many images, which you could see in this video, of the inmates before and at the beginning stages, you know, where they all kind of stand back. And then as the, you know, music classes, you know, move on in time, they have a tighter circle, and you see their you know, their body language changes also. And then towards the end of the video, where they perform outside the prison walls, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's just one of many of the presentations for Artivism. You know, I want to add one quick question. You
Sure.
said, you know, the elephant, right, was
Yeah.
something that was recognizable. So that's important to them, right?
Yes.
If okay,
It-
having
it-
something that they can communicate as recognizable. You don't see any abstract work.
Well, we do.
You do?
And I'm glad
Okay.
you're bringing this up, because I think this is very important. Because one of the things that I think what we try to instill, and what some art therapists try to do, is focus on the process of the art making and use the process itself to engage in alleviating some of these challenges and whatnot. And so we get away from relying solely on the product as a product. And so what we want to work on is getting them to value, because you're talking about an environment where everybody's being judged for something, and they were all judged to get to where they are. And so judging becomes part of their life. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we can engage in them in a way that they're not feeling judged, but instead getting their own sense of value for what they're creating? And oftentimes to create abstract imagery, or for example, even the white paper sculptures, which can be as abstract as they want to make it, there's a value in them learning that it's okay to accept something that doesn't look like something. So while a lot of their pieces that you saw when they're creating something that could be accepted by others does in fact look like something, so for them it was important that it looked like an elephant, as we start working with them, particularly in art therapy, we get away from relying on the end product, relying on the actual piece to reflect as something identifiable, but rather as something that identifies them. And that becomes so much more weighty, if I can say. So thank you for allowing me to be on that soapbox for a moment. And I want to introduce Maria Meneos. Maria is here. I see her now. You all saw her name in the presentation. She's doing this wonderful grant-driven program up in New Jersey. And I was honored enough to be kind of brought in on that.
Yeah. You're definitely, I'm definitely one of your biggest fans. So thank you for everything. You're fantastic.
That's why I introduced her, because I knew she would say that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's my opening statement in most times. So yeah, I appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, I love I've been doing a lot more work with life sentenced inmates.
Yeah.
Using Zoom and letter
Oh
form.
my goodness. Oh, I want to hear more about this. I want to hear how this is developing.
Yeah. But thank you. It's nice to see everybody.
I want to thank you, Stephanie, and it was a pleasure and an honor to be here. I recognize the time, and I appreciate you all willing to stick around for an additional 15-20 minutes. And it means a great deal for me. Argies, yeah, if you wish to learn more, certainly email ARTIVISM, but I will also put in my email address here. If anybody wants some additional information or would like to reach out, or I'll be happy to bombard your inbox with articles and research pieces that we've done in the past, or other pieces that I would certainly recommend. There's some great stuff that's out there, and I'm very pleased and honored that all of you want to hear this.
I do have to say that, you know, I've known Dave a lot longer than I've really known Dave, because you know, a lot of his papers and blogs and videos are some of my resources for my classes. So, you know, even though we just met about a year ago, I feel like I've known you for a very long time.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work. Here at ARTIVISM, we close each presentation with, I guess, a final statement from the presenter. What was your key takeaway for today? If you want to leave us with one key takeaway, what would that be?
I think the key takeaway is just recognizing that the people inside are people, and that the art continues to remind us of that. And we live in a society where people don't want that to be known. And I think we need to continue maintaining that connection and that we can reverse what's happening. So yeah, that's my takeaway. I wish I could do this all day and I could present on this for hours. And I felt constrained to those 45 minutes and I did my best. And I would love to go ahead and continue this conversation with all of you. Thank you.
So maybe we can have a part 2 then.
We could do that.
Yeah, next book, which will probably be soon, knowing you, right?
Oh, no.
Thank you,
There's not enough
everyone.
medication in the world, but thank you.
Thank you to Adelphi University, Sing for Hope, Gottesman Libraries Teachers College at Columbia University. They are our sponsors. Thank you to Carolina Cambronero Varela, Stephanie Lake, Jennifer Govin, Camille Zamora, and Monica Eunice. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Have a good day. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.